Gaze reading where the greats drop by. Trendy authors tell us all the who, what, and why. Anyone can listen, cause we're spoiler free. Gaze reading, from Pulitzer stars to book club picks, where the curious minds can get their fix. So you say you're not gay, well that's okay. There's something for everyone. Gaze reading.
Hello and welcome to Gaze Reading. I'm your host, Jason Blitman, and on today's episode, I talked to Dylin Hardcastle about their book, A Language of Limbs, and today's guest gay reader is Benedict Nguyễn, and her book, Hot Girls with Balls. Both books are out now, and both of their bios are in the show notes. It has been a week, y'all. With so many Supreme Court rulings, it has really put a damper on the end of Pride, and I've been filled with rage and frustration and disappointment, and I'm sure that I am preaching to the choir when I say all of that, and all after a really pretty solid Pride. But of course, when you're gay, every day is Pride, every month is Pride, so yeah, I've been sort of on the struggle bus with how to feel and what to do. The what to do part, I think, is really what's getting to me. So I wrote some reflections about this month over on the Gaze Reading Substack if you want to check that out. And I've just been thinking a lot about ways to support the LGBTQIA plus authors sort of in general. And it's self-promoty, but I'm really proud of the fact that this book club with Alstora is really going to exclusively feature LGBTQIA plus authors, and the percentage of profits that those authors take is so much higher than from other stores. And so I guess that is one really great way to support writers, and you sort of get something out of it too. If you haven't looked into it yet, you could learn more about it in the show notes and in the link tree on Instagram, but this month's selection is Disappoint Me by Nicola Dinan. She was a guest gay reader a couple of weeks ago. And when you sign up, you get a membership to Alstora, which also means that you get books at wholesale prices. And you join the group chats for the club, and Alstora donates a kid's book to LGBTQIA plus youth, which obviously we need now more than ever. So it does feel like a really great way to support. And subsequently, you're supporting Gaze Reading. And it's all just sort of really great and really cool. And it's going to be fun. And I hope you could join us and amplify and support these authors at the same time. The link is in the show notes and in the Instagram bio. We are at Gaze Reading on Instagram. If you have not followed yet, you could follow us over there, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have it in you to leave a 5-star review, it is certainly greatly appreciated. And I hope you all had a great Pride, as best as you possibly could have. And now please enjoy my conversations with Dylin Hardcastle and Benedict Nguyễn. A Language of Limbs by Dylin Hardcastle. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited.
Me too. We're spoiler free on Gaze Reading, so I'm not going to talk about spoilers, but the ending of this book is going to stay with me for a long time.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. I'm really proud of the ending. And funnily enough, there was a couple of times where it was like the one part of the book that I always cried in when I was writing or editing it. And it was so funny because I remember I was living in this all trans house called Sabrina while I was editing the final draft. And I remember one of my housemates walked in and saw me crying and was like, "Are you serious? Like, you can't be crying at your own book." And I was like, "It's moving."
Of course it's moving. And I imagine you were revisiting it after some time, right?
Yeah,
and these people are real to you. They're in your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always like that, I think, ending a book and parting with these people that you've been with for so long.
There's one author in particular who I've talked to who has a whole ritual for sending the book off into the world. She'll go, like, literally light a candle and put flowers in the water and let it send it off into the universe to say goodbye to these people and then move on. I love it.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just crying to my laptop.
I think that's very sweet. For the listeners, what is the elevator pitch for your book?
So A Language of Limbs is structured between limb 1 and limb 2, like a limb of your body in these sort of alternating chapters. And in limb 1's story, a 15-year-old unnamed girl is caught kissing her neighbour in Newcastle, which is a city just north of Sydney in Australia, in 1972, and she's kicked out of home. And then on the same night in 1972, also in Newcastle, another 15-year-old girl wakes up from a sex dream she's had about her best friend that's having a sleepover, and she just turns the light on, looks at her friend asleep on the floor, and turns the light off and goes back to sleep. And we essentially follow these two unnamed protagonists over the next 30 years through the almost intersections of their lives. And you do read the book, not entirely sure if they're two versions of one life in a sort of sliding door scenario, or if they are in fact different people, which is, I guess not revealed until the very end.
It's so funny you're on today's episode of Gaze Reading, because next week I'm talking to Ruben Reyes Jr. about his new book, Archive of Unknown Universes. And it is very much a alternate universe, sliding doors type. Are we in two different worlds? What happens if decisions are made sort of story. So it's a very big theme this summer.
That's so cool it feels very, I don't know what the right word is. Serendipitous or something. Yeah.
I would agree. And yet very different books.
Yeah.
Okay, this is maybe a traumatic question. And so feel free to say, shut up, Jason, I'm moving on. But since one of our protagonists, their story sort of kicks off because they were caught. Were you ever caught? It made me think of a time when I was walked in on and I had some feelings.
No, if I ever was, I've blocked it out of my memory.
Oh, good for you.
I'm kind of like, I wouldn't be surprised. I definitely been caught masturbating before as a teenager, but no, as far as I know, I didn't get caught with anyone else.
I feel like that's like teenage trauma. It's a rite of passage, right?
Truly.
the quick closing of the computer, or the quick throwing the blanket over you. Oh my God. I'm dusting up trauma inside of me as we speak.
Yeah, you're like, I wish I didn't ask that question.
I know. Suddenly I'm like, oh God. I bring up therapy so much on Gaze Reading. Thank God I have therapy tomorrow morning. Things to talk about. So obviously, I say obviously, but it's because the title has the word limbs in it is why I say obviously. But limbs are a motif really throughout the book. Can you talk a little bit about this is such a silly question, but what limbs mean to you and where that comes from, where the title comes from? The title comes up in the book, so we don't necessarily have to give it away per se, but maybe theoretically.
Yeah, so I first came up with the idea for this book actually in 2017, quite a while ago. And I was walking through Sydney CBD at night listening to music, and I was walking to a gig. And it's one of my favorite times to come up with ideas is sort of meandering through a city at night. And I was thinking about how my friend and I had been joking at the time how almost kissing is sometimes hotter than actually kissing. Yeah. And I imagined what would it look like if two lives were almost kissing over the course of a whole lifetime. And I remember I was just buzzing by the time I got to where the gig was, because I'd imagined some of the biggest moments I think in the book in this 25-minute walk to this gig. And so got there and was trying to tell my friends everything I just imagined, and they're like, cool, we actually just want to listen to the music. But I think in that wake of that, I actually went on to write another book. I wrote my third book, Below Deck, while I was living in the UK. And then while I was over there, I went to this exhibition at the Barbican in London and came across the work of Claude Cahun and Marcel Moore, and started thinking about this ideas of star-crossed lovers and thinking about a love story not as beginning with a moment of two people meeting, but what would a love story look like almost if you imagined that a relationship ends up being the body, and that you have these two limbs that are moving or tracking towards the torso where these two limbs meet up. And so I was imagining what would it look like if you started a story to carry on with this metaphor, almost at the fingertips, and you sort of traced along these limbs and then got to the point where these stories converged, and that almost the love story ends at the meeting. And part of that was because Claude Cahun and Marcel Moore, who were this lesbian couple, they were lifelong lovers and lifelong artistic collaborators. All the work they ever made pretty much after they met was made together. And they were profoundly influential in the surrealist movement, even though they largely got written out of archives and anthologies, probably because they were women and they were queer. But they I've just lost my train of thought. I'm about to get it back.
Limbs.
Yes, so Claude was commissioned by the surrealists. I think it was Paul Eluard and André Bresson asked a bunch of the surrealists in the 30s or 20s, and they basically said, what is the most important meeting of your life? And to what degree did this meeting come by either chance or necessity? And that question, like Claude had a really interesting answer, and she actually wrote about her parents' meeting and that being the beginning of her making, but a lot of the surrealists wrote about the day they met their lover or these various sort of monumental moments in her life. And I remember thinking, I guess, with this idea of limbs, of all the sort of chance encounters that happen both by chance and by necessity for two people to come together and two stories to collide. And how often, like when I've met someone significant and then we've worked out, oh, we were at that same party and here you are in the background of this video that I took, or all of the ways in which we like almost collide before, these stories like finally collide in the flesh.
And it's so interesting because you talking about that, there's this idea of being present in the moment physically, but not necessarily mentally or emotionally. You could share a space with someone, your limbs can be in the same space, but your brain and your heart are not.
Totally. And I think I've actually been thinking about that a lot recently. I guess thinking about the sort of timing of those collisions where, you know, I know that these two stories, had they like coalesced any earlier, they just wouldn't have in the same way that they do when the timing's right. I don't know. I've been really sucked into this idea recently of like meeting and colliding at like the moment when you're like able to show up in a capacity that means you really do meet someone. And I think actually like I started tea almost a year ago now, and the way that I have been like so present in my body where I almost didn't realize how dissociated I was from myself until now being like, oh, this is what it's like to feel an emotion as it's happening and feel the texture. Oh, this is the texture of joy when you're like present as it's like unfolding inside you. And it's meant that like I've just been able to show up so fully, and that my connections now with other people, I'm just meeting them in such a like closer and more it's more like instant, the meeting, as opposed to some distant, me having distance from myself and therefore distance from them.
Sure. And I imagine it talking about time aligning and things happening at the right moment in this time where you're talking about this book. But what a beautiful time for you to be able to feel present.
Yeah, truly. It's made the whole experience of touring and being able to talk about it so rich, and it's been quite incredible.
Congratulations. Is that a weird thing to say? I'm so glad that this is your experience right now.
Yeah, I don't think it's weird at all. Thank you.
You brought up Claude Cahun.
Yeah, I'm to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I have a friend that's Parisian, and he said Khan, but in a French accent.
Right. I was going to say, it depends on the accent.
Honest.
Yeah. So you spoke about their story. There is the moment where Lim 1 sees Claude Cahun on the screen, it made their skin dance. And that seeing Claude was an undoing. When has that happened for you?
Yeah, so when I came across Claude's work at the Barbican it was this exhibition on modern couples, and so there was like Virginia and Leonard, Virginia and Vida, Dora Maar and Pablo Picasso, like Frida and Diego, and it was really quite amazing because, for instance, with the Dora and Picasso section of the exhibition, Dora had like front and center, like in her work, which had historically been overshadowed by Picasso, was front and center. And so the way that this exhibition was structured was just incredible. And my background's actually in visual arts. Like I was a painter before I dropped out of art school to start writing books. And I was obsessed with surrealism. And so when I came across Claude and Marcel's work, they were doing all of these like portraits of each other. And I read the plaque beside their work introducing them. And it actually I don't remember them being like gendered. I don't remember reading any pronouns. And I actually mistook them as gay men because they both presented really looked quite androgynous. And so there was this couple, and it said in the plaque that they were surrealists. And I remember standing there, not only had I had this sort of experience seeing their portraits and like recognizing something of myself in them and having a really similar experience, I think, or I then was able to write about Lim 1 having this same feeling. And when I was looking at or reading about their work, I just like could not believe that they were surrealists and this like art movement that I'd been so obsessed with. I was like, how have I never seen these two people before?
Yeah.
And then when I went to the sort of like gift shop at the end of the exhibition, Jennifer L. Shaw, who's this amazing art historian, had written a book like quite recently. I think it had come out in 2016 or 2017, and this was 2019. And I picked up the book and I was reading it on the way back to Oxford, which is where I was living at the time, and on the train, and I was like, oh my God, they were women, and they have one of the most exhilarating love stories I think I've ever come across. And I just devoured this book on the train back from London to Oxford. And yeah, they met when they were Lucy and Suzanne, and they met when they were 14 and 17. And Lucy's mum had previously been institutionalized for, I guess, hysteria or mental illness, whatever it was at the time, and had never come out. And not long after the girls met, Lucy tried to take her own life, and her dad took her to see a psychotherapist because he was like, oh God, she's ill with the same thing that her mother had. And the psychotherapist said, she's not unwell, she's in love with Suzanne. I think if you don't let them be together, she might die. And so the dad started chaperoning her around to Suzanne's house, where he met Suzanne's mother, who I believe was a widow, and they eventually got married, which meant the girls became stepsisters. And so they were allowed to live together and were allowed to be affectionate in public, and it was like fine to assume that it was a sisterly affection. And they then lived together for their entire lives. And when World War II broke out, they went to the island of Jersey where Suzanne's family had a house to hide out, and they started making all this like really politically charged work where they were stealing newspapers because the island actually got occupied by the Nazis during World War II while they were there. And they started stealing all these newspapers and pamphlets and like rearranging the titles and the texts, and then distributing this material back out across the island, trying to encourage the soldiers on the island to dissent against Hitler. And so they were like creating all this like really radical subversive art. And at one point, the soldiers overtook their house because they needed more space to sort of house soldiers. And so they hid everything in the attic, all this really transgressive art. And then at one point, a soldier went into the attic and found it. And so they got caught and they got put on trial. And they essentially had to prove that they weren't working for anyone, because by this point the soldiers had been trying for 2 years to find out who was making all of this art. And they got put on trial, and in proving that they weren't working for anyone else, proved that they were guilty, and they got sentenced to 6 years hard labour and to be executed. And Claude actually joked in the courtroom, will we be executed before or after we do the hard labour?
Oh my gosh.
And then they were like in the prison, and I think it might actually have been on Christmas Day, one of the guards came and opened up Claude's cell and actually let Suzanne in, and they let them share a cell. And because they'd befriended some of the guards who then let them share a cell. And then not long before they were meant to be executed, the war ended and they walked free.
Yeah.
It was just so incredible. So that was my Claude and Marcel rant.
Yeah, which obviously also comes up in the book. So that was my introduction to them. But there is something that I don't want to say alluded to, but there's another element of their story that comes up a lot on Gaze Reading. I talk a lot about the difference between family and relatives. And it can be controversial. I don't think you would find it controversial, but to some people it's controversial. And what's so fascinating about the two of them is that they became family and they became relatives, but they also were each other's family. Absolutely. What a unique, I think, experience for them.
Yeah, I love that.
And the idea of found family comes up so much in the queer community and obviously is a huge part of this book. What does that mean to you? That seems like such a simple and stupid basic question, but what does found family mean to you? I think we all have a different experience with it.
Yeah, I think found family feels like the kind of, I don't know, concentrated version of what I imagine that, like, how I think about the queer community, and which I very much think of as a verb and a doing and not something that we necessarily say and then I don't know, it's not a name for me. It's like a thing that is made by the ways in which we participate in community. And
You mean found family specifically?
Yeah, I think found family within the context of I think, I'm speaking maybe more broadly to queer community, and then the found family within that is the really material ways in which we care for in like visionary ways of caring, I think. And that's, because it's a choice, right? I think relatives, we are born into this, and there's something about found family that feels deeply expansive or profoundly expansive in that it is a choice, and that we choose to show up and choose to care, in these sort of like radically expansive ways for each other.
Do you have found family or chosen family, or as Armistead Maupin says, logical family?
Yeah, no, I feel very fortunate to have, very beautiful and eclectic found family.
Yeah.
One of the houses that I was editing this book in was nicknamed Sabrina, after Sabrina and Impacciatore, because we felt like the house, like the same aesthetic as the character that she plays in White Lotus, of the sort of repressed closeted lesbian, which was, and it was like such a stylish but bizarre house that we were living in, but so beautiful and incredible. And it was the first time I'd lived with all trans people, and there was something, it was like the first time I think in my life that I really felt like home could be the reset that makes like all the living outside possible, where this house was like this space that you would walk into and just shed all your layers, like not just like material clothes, but just drop off kind of everything that had happened outside. And it really bolstered us in a way that I think that was what I was trying to capture in Uranian House, which is the queer share house in A Language of Limbs. The way that we were built up from the inside, and that this house really did exist as sort of like a calm in the eye of the storm, and there was so much joy that happened in that house, but also just so much. I was like, oh my God, my nervous system can just be so regulated at home, and I never knew this was possible. It was like, and it made everything outside feel, like I was like, oh, I could tackle anything because I've got this like refuge that I can come home and undress in.
Yeah. That is so cool. And what an incredible experience to, at the very least, feel safe.
Yeah. No, it was exactly that.
There is, though, something that comes up in the book. There's a quote, "If everyone is gay, then no one is." And so you saying that about everyone in the house was trans, I had this moment of, wait a minute, did it almost feel like it counterbalanced everything and you were living in this world where no one was trans, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so true. And actually, like, it was funny because then it would mean that, I don't know, then I remember going to this party during Sydney Fashion Week around the time that I was living in that house, and it was everyone was wearing these like very queer coded outfits, but it was just like high sort of couture fashion. And I was like shocked when it transpired that people weren't queer. Like I was like, oh, okay. Oh, I see what's going on here.
That's so interesting.
I very much think of queerness as like a visionary ways of caring, as like a politic, as like a thing that we participate in, that we are like both making and made by queer culture. Yeah, and so I'm like, even now that as I'm saying that, I'm like, what does it actually mean for clothes to be queer-coded?
Something else that comes up a bunch is just the concept of stereotypes, and stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, right? And so I guess if a whole bunch of straight people are wearing outfits that look like one would see on Elton John, then there's this weird weird is, again, not the right word, but there's this juxtaposition between who they are and how they're presenting.
Totally.
Anyway, I'm falling down this imaginary rabbit hole of me just like picturing these humans. What was your coming out journey like, if you don't mind talking about it? That's something that comes up in the book, which is why I was curious.
Yeah, I had quite a delayed coming into myself. And I think, like, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, because basically until I was 15, wanted to be a pro surfer. Was like such a nerd for surfing. Like I was like a jock, but in the sense that I was a nerd for sport. Like I was like, don't talk to me, I'm busy like practicing.
Right, I'm studying the sport.
Literally. And so I was surfing like at a national level in Australia.
wow.
Like if you had told me at 15 that I was going to be an author at 31 and not on the pro circuit, like I would have been devastated.
Oh,
What
no.
are you talking? What? I can't believe it. But I think until I was 15, I was like surfing at the beach that I grew up near that was like dominant. It was entirely men in the water. And it's really interesting because basically when I was 16, I had my first psychotic episode, and I spent the next 7 years in and out of psychiatric wards, was like hospitalized a number of times, and as a result would disappear for months at a time, like in these institutions, and then come out again. And yeah, I think when I was 20, 21, I hadn't gone for more than 6 months without having an episode. And that meant that, my life was like constantly interrupted by this, and by, I guess, losing my mind in various ways. You're already at an age where you're on the cusp of figuring out who you are, and then it's complicated by not knowing what's real versus what's not. And I think as a result, I sort of had this really delayed coming into myself, because the majority of the people that I was coming into contact with who were queer were also in hospital. And so I had these like really intense desires and urges and impulses, like one of which was like a desire that I had to cut off, or essentially remove my breasts. And I was experiencing that in the context of having bipolar and having like really intense episodes of bipolar. And so for a really long time, I conflated various like queer and trans impulses and instincts and desires with being sick. And most of my 20s was a very long and slow process of disentangling the two. And I think, it was like my sense of self was very obscured by that, and meant that, especially coming into my transness, most of my experiences were stabs in the dark, where I was like, I don't really know how this is going to feel, but I just have this desire to step in this direction anyway, and then landing there and being like, oh my God, I can't believe I ever didn't exist like this. And I actually saw my great aunt, who's 90, on New Year's Day of this year, and I hadn't seen her for a few years. I hadn't seen her since before I had top surgery. And actually, I think it was around the time I changed my name a few years ago. It was the last time I'd seen her. And I don't want to tell this story because it's so beautiful, but I basically went to see her, and I remember being quite self-conscious. I was like, she follows me on social media, but also she's 90 years old. I don't know how across all of this she's going to be.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a singlet on, and I decided to put on a t-shirt because I was like, I'm just going to make this somewhat less obvious what has happened. And I went in and I was sat with her, and I walked in, and she said, oh my goodness, look at you. Oh my God. And she was like, you look so happy. And she was like, you just look amazing. Don't you look incredible? And like I walked in, and she sat down, and she had all this tea and biscuits laid out for me, and we sat there and we spoke for a few hours. And she was asking me about my new book and my PhD and all these different things. And then she just said, she started telling the story about when I was in hospital when I was 17, and my nan had come in the two of them had come in, which was, my nan was her sister, and how my nan had apparently tossed like a bag of candy on the bed and been like, oh, do you want this? And Gwen was like saying to me, she was saying, you looked so upset that your grandmother was dismissing all this pain that you were in, and you didn't complain, and you just sat there and you weathered it anyway. But I could tell how upset you were that she was like dismissing where you were or where you were at. And I couldn't remember the story she was telling about, so I was just like nodding along. And then she said, do you think they knew? Do you think your mum and your nan knew who you were then? And then I had this moment of being like, oh my God, she's talking about me being trans. I was like, maybe I can talk about this. And so I explained what I just relayed to you about this like desire to remove my breasts that I had at that age, and how like I'd conflated that with being sick. And then she just asked me, she was like, was it a big surgery? And so then I talked to her about the surgery. And I said none of my friends could deny how much happier I was afterwards, even though it was like really intense. And she just said, yeah, that's obvious to me. And then I feel emotional. I'm thinking about it now, but basically she looked at me and she said, I bet you had a lot of people telling you not to do that, and I bet you had a lot of people asking you, are you sure? And she was like, it is a strange thing. I haven't heard of anyone wanting to do that before. And then she said, but for the rest of your life now, you can rest assured that you can trust yourself. And not many people can say that about themselves. And she was like, because you listened to yourself, you listened to this thing that you had inside you and you just did it anyway. And I've been thinking about that so
Wow.
much because I think in a world that is very much insisting on the expulsion of trans and gender diverse people, not only from public life, but also from the public imagination. And in this world that's so often distrustful of trans and gender diverse and also just queer testimonies full stop, I think to be able to trust yourself and listen to those impulses and desires is such a gift.
Yeah.
And it feels really, I don't know, revolutionary or something.
That's so incredibly special. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Thank you. Thanks for asking the question.
Yeah. Is Gwen still with us?
She is, yeah, she is. I'll have to send her this.
We love Gwen.
We love
Thank you, Gwen. If everyone in the world could be more like Gwen, then the world would be a better place.
I agree.
Although she probably has her flaws too. We all have our flaws. We're only human. The follow-up in the book about coming out is the concept of needing to come out all the time. And this is something my husband and I will sidebar about, that so many people don't necessarily understand even the micro coming out that you have to do on a regular basis, to just acknowledge your husband in a meeting so that someone knows. It's just like a teeny tiny clock. Oh, they're gay. Oh, they have a husband. Oh, little nuggets here and there. It's just a constant thing that is something that I think has started to come naturally to us as queer people, but also just a part of life that we don't really think about anymore, which is just so weird. So it was a nice to read in the book.
Yeah, yeah. And it was also one thing that I was really interested in bringing into the book as well was like the choice not to, and that not like putting any sort of moral value on that, because I think there was this woman who I saw speak at a event called Queer Stories in Australia a few years ago, and she's Lebanese, and her and her partner met doing this like organizing for Palestine and in the 90s, and she was talking about her and her partner coming together in this beautiful story. And then she spoke about the decision not to come out to her family, and she said this one sentence that has stuck with me for so long, where she said, if your sexuality or your gender identity is like the point of friction in your life, it just goes to show how many places you belong everywhere else. And I've thought so much about that. And actually, Kara's character in the book, her parents are Irish Catholics, and her family she chooses not to go, not to come out to them at all. Yeah. And that was like one thing that I was like really interested in exploring, not only this idea of having to come out over and over again, but the specific moments in which you decide not to. And yeah, not, as I said, not placing any sort of moral judgment on that, because I think one thing that Lim One learns is to respect that. And Kara talks about how her mother would genuinely believe that she wouldn't find her in heaven. And she's like, I actually don't want my mum to die thinking that she's not going to see me again. Yeah. And that like silence, I think Lim One can't quite grapple with that initially, and does place a moral judgment on. It's like, you're not living your truth, and is judging her for it, but ultimately learns, I think, yeah, that silence is this gift actually that Kara is giving her mother.
Yeah. It's also, again, the things that come up all the time on Gaze Reading simply because of the nature of who we all are, but the concept of how stuck in binary thinking we are as humans, and it is just how we have to declare something so that everyone around us knows what box to put us in.
Totally.
And not to make this about me, but you talking about needing to determine when you do and don't want to come out, or whatever term you want to use. When I was in high school, a kid came up to me and flat out asked me, "Are you gay?" And my response to him was, "What do you think?" And he said, "I think you are." And I said, "Okay, you can keep thinking whatever you want to think, and I will just keep being whoever I am." And upon reflection, I don't know how the hell I thought of something like that to say. I'm very proud of 17-year-old Jason. I think if we all just need something to hold on to, and it's frustrating and disappointing, and we can't just be and let today live our life how we're living it today, and tomorrow live our life how we're living it tomorrow, or minute by minute or moment by moment, because that's all life is.
Yeah, surely.
You use the phrase coming into yourself. And I think the book, there's a lot of becoming. What does it mean to become to you?
to draw off the image that I use in the book is, I think so much of like my experience of queerness has been like one of almost being suspended in like the state of ambiguity of things like not quite making sense or not quite being able to place something, and then that picture like coming into focus. And so like for me, I very much feel like coming into myself and this processes of becoming have been about, I like the image that I use at the very beginning of the book is of looking at this picture upside down, and it's like abstract shapes and you're trying to make sense of it, and then the picture is like slowly inverted and suddenly the like forms take shape and you see what the picture is of. And that's very much, I guess, how I've experienced this. And I think even having readers suspended in the state of not knowing whether these are two versions of one life or if they are in fact different people was part of me wanting to suspend readers in that same sense of ambiguity, so that the text is also slowly coming into focus and the like story is taking shape eventually in a way that then starts to make sense to us, where then you're like, oh, I can't remember what the world looked like before it didn't make sense.
I like what I wanted to say would have given things away, and I don't want to do that. But yes, I can concur. And again, since you can't see me, you didn't see me like very emphatically nodding along with everything you were just saying. There's a quote in the book: "Life, I believe, is a constant wandering. And if you're lucky, you come across someone you want to wander with." What do you look for in a fellow wanderer?
I think something to do with time. I've like recently started wandering for someone who's walking at the same pace as me in this way that where I'm like, I don't know, I think I move around a lot, and my like way of being in the world has always been like quite fast paced, and when I like travel a lot and I'm in like a lot of different, I'm always like on the go, even when I'm like at home in the city that I live in. I mean, some of my friends who have me on Find My Friends literally play a game called Where is Dylin? If they live together and they like open up their phone and they'll be like, okay, where's Dylin? And they will have to guess where I'm gonna be.
That's so funny.
Because I'm always in different places, and recently, I've met someone who is moving at the same pace as me, and in moves through the world in a really similar way. And I think historically, maybe it's that like way of being has been something that people have found like exciting to be around, but then ultimately have found it challenging in the sense that then they're like, okay, but I'm a homebody and why aren't you home enough? Or like that then it like comes into friction, and that something that's like initially quite enticing ends up being almost like the point of the beginning of the unravel. And this recently has been so exciting to just be like, oh, what would this look like if someone was walking like very much beside me in that way.
Yeah, you said that, and my brain immediately thought that was the most obvious answer. And not saying you answered obviously, but for me to not think that is what you would have said. But of course, you want to wander with someone who is wandering at your pace.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, this is so random and unrelated, and I don't want to give anything away, but I will say that there are vows in the book. And they are amazing. I don't want to ask, like, where did these come from? But is it that you are a poet in your heart? Is it that you're a romantic? Is it that you have great examples of deep love around you? Is it... Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Because it, like, really came from a person... I read it as though whoever wrote this understands love and commitment. Really, they really moved me.
That's so cool to hear, I think, because for someone that has been to so few weddings, I really didn't know if they were going to resonate. But it's funny. I like two things. I think the first is that so many of my like platonic friendships that like of friends that I would consider my found family, they have modeled like such stable and consistent and slow love for me, that or slow love to me, modeled this like a beautiful way of loving that has like really, I think so much of the love that I've learned has been actually from friends and from found family. And then the second thing I think is that I very much feel like this book was writing a love that I like maybe only thought, or not only thought, but had only experienced in fiction, and it felt like this really beautiful like writing or setting out the kind of love that I like wanted to experience in my life. And I feel very much like I am experiencing that at the moment, and I'm like, oh, this is like life imitating art. I'm not sure which way around it's going.
Oh, I love that.
But I feel very lucky to feel
What does real love mean to you?
I think it's in the doing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Say more.
I think that it's, as a person that works in words, I'm way more interested in how those words are like enacted in the ways that we like offer a couch to a friend that's just been evicted, or like are going around to cook meals for someone that's sick. Yeah, love very much feels to me like a thing that we do much more so than a thing that we say. And I think that's how, there's also one other thing that I just thought of, the conversation that Lim One has with Big Dave in the book, when they're talking about love being not just like a thing that we say, but a thing that we feel. And that it is like, what a beautiful thing to move through the world knowing that there are people that like are feeling love for you, and that sort of like emanates out, and that you like, I don't know, that really bolsters me. And it makes me feel quite strong. It's like in the way that I then move through the world, to know that exists, and that there's people in my heart and I'm in theirs. And
it's so interesting that is how you articulated this, because I, in another conversation earlier today, was expressing my utter disdain for heart hands, when you take your two hands and make a heart. Because and upon unpacking it, I think what I realized is it comes across as so presentational. And I was explaining to them, this person, I was like, it gives me the ick. Like, I genuinely, it like makes my stomach churn. I cannot understand why, but it's like I have a phobia of the two hands coming together to make a heart. I don't know. I can't explain it. But
amazing.
But the concept of love is a thing that we do, or love is a thing that we feel, I talked around in circles with this author, and I got to the point where I was like, oh, I think because what I want to see is someone touching their heart, right? Showing, you have touched me, you have made me feel, or I feel a way about you. And to fully understand that the love is coming from somewhere, or it is bursting out of me to do something for you, versus something so presentational as the heart hands.
Totally. Yeah,
So
because it feels like the heart hands feel disconnected. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And I think that's why I am allergic to them.
That makes sense.
Anyway, this is like my new high horse, and I need to get off of it. This is so, it's so weird. It really is, and I don't understand why. And there's no way I'm ever going to win this fight, because Taylor Swift does the heart hands, and that's it. Period. The end.
End of story.
I know, exactly. Oh my God. You talk about the importance of names, which is amazing, because we really are only learning about Lim 1 and Lim 2. And it comes up as a sound our voice makes that signifies us. A quote that spoke to me is that your name remains the cause of your story. What do you mean by that?
So I think it's like the thing that all the other sentences that we like construct, or the stories that we tell about ourselves, start out from that name. And because I wrote this book, I started writing this book in 2021, which was the year that I chose my name, Dylin. And so I was thinking a lot about what, like meaning I wanted to embed in like this new iteration of myself.
Mm.
And Dylin, especially the way that I spell it, is the Welsh spelling. My family's from Wales, and it means born of the sea or toward the tide. And I chose it because I was such a water baby, but also water has been this thing that I've like constantly turned to throughout my life.
Mm.
And yeah, and so I think, yeah, that name then felt so significant because, oh, this is speaking to like how I am in the world. And yeah, every story that I tell about myself is emanating out from this like meaning, if that makes sense.
Might you say that it's all the limbs coming off of your name?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I love that. And of course, having read the book, that means so much more. / you could also listen to this and then read the book, and reading the book will mean so much more, and vice versa.
The one thing, yeah, that I've actually realized in the last year, and which I think also makes the name feel even more significant, is I really didn't read much growing up. I was such a painfully slow reader, and as I said, I was a nerd for surfing and I just wanted to be a pro surfer. But it meant that I spent hours and hours for years, from when I was like 7 or 8 until I was 15, before and after school, in the water, reading water, like reading the ocean and like reading swell lines to then be able to judge like which wave you're going to pick and how or where you're going to position yourself by the time it gets to you. And so my like reading practice in some sense when I was growing up was like just reading water. And I think then this name of Toward the Tide makes so much sense. And even like this book, surprisingly, is the least I've written about water of all 4 of my books. And yeah, it just continues to be this sort of, here I go again, the current at the bottom of my work. But it underscores everything that I've ever written about.
An undercurrent, really?
Oh, so cliche.
It's funny that's what you say, because what I was going to say as we're ending our conversation, something that a beautiful thing to take away from the book is that the title is A Language of Limbs, and language does not always mean words. And so you talking about reading the water, right?
Yeah.
And I think people think of, when they hear reading, they think reading words. But you can read energy, you can read situations, you can read all sorts of things that don't involve words.
Totally. Yeah, and I think even the A Language of Limbs title, there's like a part in the book where one of the characters is meditating on the word family and what does it mean to be family in this context, like for this queer family, and is searching for the collective noun for family and writes this poem where she's like testing out different words that could stand in I think it's like a held of friends or a comfort of people, or she's like playing out all these different collective nouns. And the title was actually me imagining what the collective noun of limbs could be. I imagined limbs as like dancing around each other. And so then, yeah, as you said, like you can read a whole bunch of different things, and like reading body language, this sort of like the way these 2 stories like almost collide and almost intersect, but have this like lifelong dance. That's what I imagined the language to be.
Yeah. Very interpretive, like an interpretive dance.
Exactly.
Like waves in an ocean.
You got it.
Dylin Hardcastle, A Language of Limbs. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
The book is wonderful. It is out now wherever you get your books. And what else? Anything else to say? Anything else to tell you? I don't think so. It's terrific. Everyone go buy it.
Thank you.
Cascade Weird Time.
I love that your nails are giving Glinda an alphabet, but also book cover.
Book cover. Tis the season. Have to be in the mood.
Are you a Wicked fan? Am I projecting onto you?
Project away. I've seen the movie, but I have not seen the musical, so
Okay.
I actually don't know how it ends. If I see the second one, that'll be a surprise.
Yes.
But,
there are a lot of people that I know who don't know how the story ends, and I'm obsessed. It's been around for 20 years.
things that miss me. But during the film, I saw it with a friend. My friend reached over and grabbed my pinky,
Oh, no.
and I just burst out laughing. 'Cause,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we love them. It's
An
fine.
incredible press tour.
That is about to start again.
Are they okay?
Are they okay? You're living their life, I feel like, right now. You have your pink and green nails. You're on a press tour.
Of a kind, yeah. Honored to be here.
Yes, Ariana Grande.
Yes.
How's your day? What's happening?
Day's been okay. Had rehearsal for this dance work that I've been choreographing, and we did our first run through today, so that felt great.
Say more. What is
Did
this
some work
for?
emails.
What is it? What is this dance piece?
Yeah, it's a short work called Defense, and it's based off of ideas that I'd been toying around with. You know, I have single track minds, one thought. It's about sports.
Where did this love of sport? I don't want to even say love again. I'll stop projecting onto you. But where did sports come from for you?
That's not projection. That's stated. We love sports.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was not very athletic growing up, but I started dancing and formal training when I was around 17, and that just helped me understand my body and what my body could do differently. I'm like, wow, there's more potential here than I've been activating.
Were you well-rounded? Were you a modern girly? Were you a tap girly? What was your dance
My
genre?
early training was in ballet, but
Yes.
I've become a bit more well-rounded. I've become more well-rounded since.
My background is in theater, and when I went to theater summer camp, once a week there would be like a dance class, and so every week changed like what you were learning, and so I wouldn't call it formal training. I would call it summer camp training, whatever that means. But my point being, I've taken
Still
a ballet
important.
class, I've taken a tap class, I've taken a jazz class, so I'm familiar with a tendu.
You've had exposure.
Yes,
You can
exactly.
plie.
Yes, I can plie. I can grand plie.
Incredible.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Very big.
Ariana Grande plie. Bring it back.
Full circle.
So it's always been volleyball, or were sports like a thing in your household? Are you a football person? Tell me more.
Not really. Yeah, it's volleyball.
Yeah, interesting. I say interesting because it's like niche in that you're not like turning on the TV and seeing volleyball.
Not in this country, yeah.
Right.
But it's a lot more popular in other parts of the world.
Mhm.
And I was curious about what is it about volleyball that hasn't allowed it to reach a certain kind of mainstream?
What do you think it is?
Like a pet theory is just that it's like in the US, like men's sports will tend to have to like eye roll pave the way for the women's side to be popular.
Yeah.
And like the way that baseball, basketball, American football allow a certain kind of aggressive
Right,
masculinity,
behavior.
and they fold that into the physicality of the sport itself. It's my little gender analysis.
If there was tackling in volleyball, it would be very popular in the States.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a net. It's in that sense more polite.
But I'm suddenly on this like volleyball wavelength of just, I wonder how it became like the thing that you played on the beach and not baseball, right? Like how did volleyball end up to be the thing? It's just, anyway, very interesting. We could do like a deep dive armchair history on volleyball.
Do you have ball sports that you like watching or playing?
None that I could talk about on the podcast.
Incredible. On air, off air.
I was the kid who played t-ball and was put in the outfield and just twirled my arms and looked up at the sky. And I've never been to a football game. I've been to some hockey game. No, but that's not a ball game. That's a puck.
Flat ball?
It's a flat ball. It's like a burger. Yeah, I don't know why. I'm very competitive. And so conceptually, I like
Healthy.
sports.
Yeah.
But I think as a kid, it was this like projection of quote unquote manliness. And I didn't fit in with the kids that were playing the sports. And then as an adult, I'm so annoyed that someone who tackles other people and like kicks balls makes more money than teachers. So I like morally have a hard time with it, but I'll play pickleball with friends.
Absolutely. Ball sports for adults.
Yeah, though it's funny because I said I was competitive. The very first time we went to play pickleball with some friends, we were invited, and I was like, great. I was looking up rules before we went. I'd never played before. We get there, and we're just like noodling around, and I was cool. When are we gonna start? Let's get the points started. And then the one who organized it was like, oh no, we don't really calculate points. We just play. And I was like, okay, but how do we know who wins?
My name is Benedict Nguyễn. You understand.
Yes, exactly. So once I reframed my expectations of, okay, this is not a winning-losing situation. It's a hanging out with friends and hitting a ball over a net, then I was on board. But
So you don't secretly count the points in your head?
oh no, I do.
Okay, great.
But I'm not like angry that no one else is.
Intrinsic motivation.
Exactly, right. I'm competing against myself from the last time.
It's funny how, in my experience in like dance theater world, to see people's competitiveness come out in certain contexts.
Yeah.
And
Is there something in particular that comes to mind for you?
I think for me, it's been more like I took myself out of like cattle calls at a certain part early in my career. I was like showing up to those and just seeing everyone size each other up, and I'm like, this isn't about this for me.
Yeah.
Or I'm not tough enough for this.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I'm like, wow, everyone's muscling their way towards a job that probably isn't fun. I don't know.
It certainly doesn't pay as well as an athlete.
Not in this economy.
No. Oh my God. Yeah. Anyway, speaking of competing for things, competing for your attention, Benedict Nguyễn, what are you reading as my guest gay reader today? I have to know.
Yeah. Speaking of theater, the book that I've been like talking to friends about is, I think, are you nodding? Do you know that?
No, tell me.
I
I'm
want
like,
to talk about Audition.
no. Oh my God. Tell me everything. I'm obsessed.
Wow. Katie Kitamura, what a hero. I don't have my copy handy.
I had it reachable. Not like it was.
You have
It is.
to keep it nearby.
Yes. Oh my God. Obsessed. Tell me more. Tell me what. Why do you love it? Tell me everything.
I think I finished it, and then I had my few interpretations. We're spoiler free.
We're spoiler free.
And then I was like digesting my interpretations. And then I had dinner with a friend who like was like a little meh on wanting to read it. And I was like, please, I need to talk about it.
Yes.
And then she had 12 different interpretations that I hadn't thought of. That I was like,
and this is why the book is so amazing. On one hand, it is like it is an easy read in the sense of it's short, the sentences are not hard to understand, but there's so much to process and to talk about with other people. And it broke my brain.
Incredible, as the best book should.
Yes. Is there anything else that you're reading?
Yeah, I have Vera Blossom's How to Fuck Like a Girl right now. A series of essays that's so funny, so witty.
I just moderated a panel that Vera was on.
Wow. Incredible.
Okay, well, Hot Girls with Balls.
Hot Girls with Balls.
By Benedict Nguyễn. What is your elevator pitch?
Yeah, the phrase that I've been like tossing around in the past few days has been sapphic, sporty, sicko satire. It's about two volleyball players who are rivals. They're also lovers who have a secret influencer rivalry that they don't talk about, that really only one of them is in on. And they're also two Asian American trans women who play for the men's league.
Yeah.
Hot Girls with Balls.
Yeah. Again, wow. Projecting is like the theme of this episode. I can make assumptions of where this comes from, but where does this book come from for you?
Yeah, it was thinking about a few themes happening at once, the volleyball that I was talking about earlier, and the ongoing attack on trans rights in this country that have been going on for a long time, and the discourse around where trans people fit in sports. I was thinking about like discourse around certain kinds of internet novels. I was also reading some criticism that was like, nobody wants to read about the pandemic. We should just pretend it never happened. And I was like, what if I like mixed all of these themes in the same book?
Mhm.
And what if there wasn't just one but two protagonists who are Asian American trans women? And what if they concurrently make the same kind of pessimistic choice about recognizing that they would have a harder time building their careers in a women's league than in their gender assigned at birth league?
Yeah.
And finding if I could open up some humor in that.
Yeah. The first page alone, I think, gives a sense of the ride that we're in for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta set the tone.
So, okay, completely unrelated. Something I've been
Another pivot.
asking all of my recent guest gay readers since I heard this question asked on the Hulu show Mid-Century Modern, in an effort to amplify the incredible humans around us in our life. If you were to die tomorrow, who would you ask to delete the search history on your computer?
Incredible question. Yeah, my search history is not that interesting. I'm not worried about her. It's
No, but who are we amplifying?
weird medical and with that, yeah, that. And so it's like, I'm lucky I have so many friends I call up, and friends who have been supporting me throughout this book process.
Yeah.
And yeah, networks and communities that
So
I've
you're
been
just
building
bragging.
over my adult life.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have so many
That's-
people I could turn to.
You said I was on a press tour. I said, here's a persona.
Oh
And
my
the
God.
persona is bragging.
Yes, love. Anything else you want to brag about? You could brag about your star review.
Yeah, I'm been very stoked that yes, we've gotten some really nice reviews.
Yes.
6 in Green Summer. Let's go. As
Yes,
I've
6 in
been
Green Summer.
talking about it.
Oh my God, amazing. Benedict Nguyễn, everyone go get your copy of Hot Girls with Balls, out now, wherever you get your books. And thank you for being my guest gay reader today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Dylin. Thank you, Benedict. A Language of Limbs and Hot Girls with Balls are both out now, wherever you get your books. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye.